Ceci dit, je voudrais respectueusement inviter son Excellence le Dr Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, pour son allocution.
Thank you, Program Director. Your Excellency, President Robert Gabriel Mugabe, Chairperson of the African Union and President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency, Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, President of the Palestinian Authority, the Secretary General of the Arab League, Mr. Nabil Al-Arabi, Excellencies, former heads of government and former Secretaries General of and Chairpersons of the OAU and AU, Excellencies, visiting heads of state, Excellency Dr. Carlos Lepres, Executive Secretary of UNECA, Excellency Dr. Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, Excellencies, members of the Executive Council and other ministers, representatives of the AU organs, Deputy Chairperson Erastus Mwenja and fellow commissioners, visiting ministers, CEO of NEPAD Agency, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, Excellencies, heads of African Regional Economic Communities, and African Union Specialized Representative and Liaison Offices, Excellencies, members of the Permanent Representative Committee, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, officials from Capital and from the AU, ladies and gentlemen, Karibuni. It is my distinct honor to welcome you to this 26th session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government and to the AU headquarters in the ever-growing city of Addis Ababa. I can think of no better way of starting this important gathering than the song that we have just heard about our people's aspirations in Agenda 2063, performed by a group from Zimbabwe. Of course, they sum it up. I choose peace, you choose unity, he or she chooses prosperity, because we are Africans, one people, one voice, we are Africans. Indeed, it has been said that about Africans, when we mourn, we sing. When we celebrate, we sing. When we mobilize, we sing. We therefore know that when our artists compose songs, when our poets put it into verse, and when our painters express on canvas, it is a matter that touches our souls and hearts. So we thank the group from Zimbabwe for capturing the essence of the transformation that is required, but we'll also like to encourage artists in all our countries to embrace Agenda 2063 as it is our individual and collective aspiration. Excellencies, Africa is very diverse in every respect. Artists throughout the ages have eulogized the great diversity of our beautiful continent. They painted the majestic mountains as they navigated the water masses of our lakes and wrote about the symphonies of our waterfalls. They sang about the mighty Congo River, meandering at some points and thundering through others, about the Nile, the Zambezi, the Limpopo, the Niger, and about the Atlantic and Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Red Sea surrounding our shores. African people compose, perform, write, recite, and sing in over 1,000 languages. Our priests and imams, rabbis and pastors pray for Africa, mindful of our common humanity. They tell the stories of our ancient civilization and heritage, the obelisks of Aksum, the pyramids of Egypt, and of course of Sudan, the stone churches of Lalibela, the historic sites of Great Zimbabwe, the Mzab Valley, the Mapungubwe, the Ribera Grande, the Medina, the stone town of Zanzibar, the old towns of Jena, the universities and libraries of Timbuktu and Alexandria, and sing praises to the ancient kingdoms of Songhai, Mali, Ghana, and Dahomey. The great diversity of Africa is its biggest strength and its enduring splendor. We also know that we share our land with 4,700 mammals, 200,000 species of birds, and 950 amphibian species, a diversity that we ought to preserve. Deep in the bowels of our continent, African workers are slaving in the bauxite, industrial, diamonds, manganese, phosphate rock, platinum group metals, gold and zirconium mines, which represent the largest or second largest reserves of our important minerals. The miners of at least 16 countries are involved in extraction of precious metals, moreover 13 of them in diamonds, a further 6 in copper. The largest producer of coltan, essential to modern technologies such as telephones, laptops, tablets, is in Africa. Many African countries extract iron ore, while the majority of iron deposits still lie dormant in other countries. In addition to the 36 countries, we are also home to the world's largest extraction of chrome, manganese, vanadium, vermiculite, and the second largest extractors of limonite, palladium, and rutile. More than 85% of global phosphate reserves are located in North Africa. Furthermore, the majority of African countries, which is a paradox, remain in the dark. A lot of our African people do not have energy, and yet 26 of our countries produce oil and gas. 18 countries extract uranium. We also have an abundance of sun, wind, geothermal, and hydro to power renewable energies which are necessary for Africa's transformation. We have allowed for far too long the diversity of our land, soil, workforce, oceans, forests to be taken away as raw materials, thus exporting the necessary jobs and supplementary revenue streams along with the means of our development. Excellencies, a few days ago, the Executive Council at a retreat in Mekelle, north of Ethiopia, discussed the rich diversities of our people, of our cultures, of the biodiversity, minerals, and natural resources. We came to the conclusion that indeed the Africa we have is rich. But the paradox is that the majority of African people are poor. We must therefore resolve this ironic paradox that deprives us from creating wealth and shared prosperity. Unlike other regions, Africa has the human and other resources to leapfrog development at a much faster pace. We must also utilize the splendor of our landscapes, our long coastlines, our beaches, mountains, lakes, wildlife, and heritage to expand domestic, African, and global tourism. We continue to welcome tourists from outside the continent, but for the over 1 billion Africans to visit Africa, we ask the heads of state to consider the proposed changes that the Executive Council will bring to make the free movement of Africans on our continent possible. In the climate change negotiations last year, Africa showed that it is also not indifferent to its responsibility to our planet. Even though we contribute the least to global emissions and are most affected, we are leapfrogging to promote climate-smart agriculture, renewable energy, and to save our lakes, forests, oceans, and rivers, and to ensure against natural and other disasters through the African Risk Capacity Agency. Although the final commitments of climate deal fall short of what is required, we call on all African states to move more swiftly and to make sure that we indeed unlock the wealth of our nations. Through renewed commitment to the beloved continent, 50 years after the birth of the OAU, we reaffirmed our determination to build an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven and managed by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. By adopting Agenda 2063, we pledge to act to change the present and build the Africa we want. It is our generation's mission to ensure that we build a rich Africa with prosperous people. Excellencies, during 2016, as we celebrate the Year of Human Rights with particular focus on the rights of women and girls, we must therefore speed up transformation. We must continue to place our people and their basic human rights at the center of Agenda 2063. This includes our people's rights to education, to food, nutrition, to health, to safe water, sanitation, to jobs, right to energy, and a right to peace and a safe environment, and also to do away with extremism so that indeed they can reach their full potential. In addition to the rights to association, to free speech, freedom of the media, and to the protection from discrimination on any grounds. We are making progress on these, but very slowly. We must use 2016 as a platform to advance these human rights of all inhabitants of our continent in their full diversity as we work together to create the Africa we want. We acknowledge that our united voices paint a picture of what we desire for ourselves, for future generations, and for the continent. The aspirations reflect the desire for shared prosperity and well-being, for unity and integration for the continent of free citizens and expanding horizons, where the full potential of women and youth are realized, with freedom from fear, disease, and want. It is indeed those ideals that are enshrined in Agenda 2063 that we need to translate into individual and collective action. As we reflect at this summit on how best to realize these aspirations of the African people, we resolve how to resolve the paradox which foreign ministers deliberated about at their retreat. We need to ensure that the words of wisdom from one of our forebearers resonate with us and future generations. And I would like at this point to quote those words from Emperor Haile Selassie at the founding meeting of the OAU, when he said, "Throughout history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, the silence of the voices of justice when it mattered, that has made it possible for evil to triumph." Close quote. By adopting Agenda 2063, we raised our voices in unison to reclaim our past and claim our future. We have refused to be inactive, indifferent, or silent about the evil of violent extremism, of gender-based violence, the suffering and misery of our people as a result of wars and conflicts. We refuse to allow injustice and the violation of human rights of individuals and groups, no matter how small they are and no matter how much their views differ from ours. Excellencies, at this stage, we'd like to say we bow our heads in acknowledgement of the AU peacekeepers who continue to be in the front line of our efforts to silence the guns on the continent, and for those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. We are also not indifferent to the plight of our young people who met over the last 2 days in Addis to discuss about their own responsibilities and about what they expect from us. One of the things I just want to mention from their discussions was how they said, as youth, they want to be used as agents of change in terms of peace, because it is the youth that carries the guns, so they want to be it should be the youth that advocates peace and ensures that our societies are not ripped apart by terrorism that erode the fabric of our societies and our unity. The young men and women also want education and skills so that they become engines and drivers of our renaissance and transformation. But of course, we should try and accelerate meeting their demands because indeed their patience is running thin and there are growing perceptions that we may be indifferent to their plight. At this stage, I also want to say that Pope Francis, over 50 years after the words of Emperor Selassie, recently conveyed the same sentiments in his World Peace Day message when he said, I quote, "Clearly, indifference is not something new. Every period of history has known people who close their hearts to the needs of others, who close their eyes to what is happening around them, who turn aside to avoid encountering other people's problems." He continued to say, when people witness the denial of their elementary rights, such as the right to food, water, health, care, or employment, they are tempted to obtain them by force, close quotes. So having been entrusted by our people with the duty to lead, to care, and to work tirelessly and selflessly to transform Africa and create a better life for all, as a leadership, we are not and should not be indifferent to this great responsibility. Excellencies, our pledge in Agenda 2063 is to use the diversity that is our strength as a force for peace and democracy, to transform our economies and eradicate poverty and create a better life for all Africans. I would also like to announce that on the 14 to 15 April 2016, we shall convene the inaugural economic platform in Mauritius to have a conversation with the African private sector, academics, think tanks, on the urgent issue of the huge skills gap in the continent, on the issues of industrialization, and many other issues that we face, infrastructure. Excellencies, during the 50th anniversary, we also committed to the completion of decolonization process. On Western Sahara, as Africans, we pushed for the referendum and agreed on it. But then, for 25 years, we were on pause. In 2016, we can no longer be indifferent to the position of the people of Western Sahara, who have struggled to determine their fate. 20 years is a generation who has been languishing in refugee camps being held back from our continental march towards the Africa we want. The referendum is a promise we made. Their future in Africa depends on it. We would like to urge the Secretary General of the United Nations and the UN to help resolve this matter. Before the threat of radicalization of these young people in the camps, in the face of our indifference and inaction, become a further destabilizing force. Excellencies, to unlock the full potential of our continent, we must put an end to the pervasive culture that limits full participation of girls and women in all spheres of society. There is progress, but not at an expected level, approved in Agenda 2063. This discrimination in law, by practice, in culture, through pervasive sexist attitudes, take a diversity of forms: exclusion from land rights, gender-based violence, child marriages, which deny from opportunities for education, among other limited factors that maintain them in a second-class citizen status. Moreover, we boast an unprecedented diverse pool of human resources between the ages of 15 and 35. But 60% of those do not have jobs. The skills revolution, so necessary in the realization of Agenda 2063, making agriculture and agribusiness attractive to young men and women, their involvement in manufacturing implies that we create the jobs and equip young people with the necessary skills required to transform our economies along the value chain of all our resources. Excellencies, let me use this opportunity to extend on behalf of the AU Commission a very special welcome to the heads of state and government who have been newly elected. His Excellency President Kabore of Burkina Faso and President Magufuli of Tanzania, as well as our congratulations to the heads of state that were elected, President Ouattara of Cote d'Ivoire and President Conte of Guinea, on their re-election since the last summit. I also would like to welcome our brother, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, on the mantle of responsibility that he assumed for this very critical African institution. Before I conclude, let me thank the Chairperson of the Union, His Excellency Robert Gabriel Mugabe, for the excellent cooperation and guidance offered during his term in 2015, but also to extend our gratitude to his team, especially the Foreign Minister and the Ambassador, but also thank him for the political and history classes that punctuated our deliberations and that kept us engaged. So allow me now to conclude with a call to action from the only elected woman president on our continent, President Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, when she reminded us that the size of our dreams must always exceed our current capacity to achieve them. If your dreams don't scare you, they are not big enough, she said. So we choose peace, unity, and prosperity. Asanteni sana, muito obrigado, shukran, jazlan, merci beaucoup, muchas gracias, I thank you, ngiyabonga.